It is indeed for me a very special privilege and honour to be given the opportunity to say a few words off the cuff, as unaccustomed to making speeches as I am. I'll give it my best effort. This book is very special to me and to the Indian community. As previous speakers said, the Indian community have really contributed in so many ways and continue to contribute to this great country, Australia. I note Len's words that in the early days we depended on India. Of course, otherwise Australia wouldn't have survived. For me, it's very special because I've related this to the Parliament before, and I've struck up a friendship with Crystal and Len because out of the blue, about 3 years ago, I suspect, I got a phone call and they wanted to make an appointment in my office in Wagga Wagga. Why? Because they'd read Hansard, and where I recorded that my great-grandfather had come to Australia in about 1900. His name was Sundar Singh, and he came from a place called Kumat in Jalandhar. I think it's pronounced Jalandhar. And I'd like to visit there one day. But he came in about 1900. He actually came here and he was a hawker. And he wasn't very successful on his first trip. So my cousins tell me that he actually went home to India, where his father was quite successful, and he returned a second time, and from there he became a success. He married an English lady. Her name was Elizabeth Toulouse, and it was as you can understand, a mixed marriage. I don't know what the situation was then, but they produced 5 children. One of those children was my grandmother, Dorothy. She married a fellow by the name of Ladd, and they had 6 children. And one of those children was my mother, Margaret. And grandfather Singh lived in Swan Hill. He actually started with a rucksack on his back, and he hawked, and then he got a wagon, and as things went on, he prospered. He bought a dairy farm, and I understand too he owned some shops in Swan Hill. And during the Great Depression, and the war years, he actually gave credit to a lot of people who were struggling. And the story goes that my grandmother would be walking with great-grandmother, and she'd say years after, that person still owes us X amount of dollars. I think I've got that trait. I wonder if they're ever going to pay up. Crazy, you owe me those couple of dollars. So, and she would often lament the fact that great-grandfather would give credit and was very generous to his community. He also participated in community events, but he died fairly young, and he's buried in Swan Hill, where Crystal actually went and photographed his grave. I gave direction to where it was, and they seem to have found it no trouble at all. Grandfather, I'm told, owned the first car in Swan Hill, one of the first cars. It was a nickel-plated engine car, so it must have been specially ordered, as they were in those days. And he picked it up, being used to having horse teams and having sulkies and things like that. Took the car home and went to, of course, parked the car in the shed and said, "Woo boy," and went straight through the back wall of the shed with the brand new car. So grandmother would often tell me lots of stories about her early days where the hawkers would actually come and stay on the farm. So they would often camp on the farm. They would cook and make the kids johnny cakes and all sorts of things. They spoilt the children rotten, actually. And farm children always look forward to the Indian hawkers turning up with silks and all the things that weren't readily available. But she would tell me some stories. And then, of course, there was the fact that great-grandfather, being rather prominent in the community, was relied upon to help with those cremations and the things that needed to occur. And quite often the hawkers were there by themselves, and it was tradition, I think, customary for remains to go home to the Ganges and things like that. So she would tell me stories that I'm not going to relate, because some of them were quite troublesome as a child. They used to play terrible tricks on the hawkers, and perhaps we'll save that for another time, but it certainly kept us kids in hysterics, the things that those 6 or those 5 young kids would get up to. One of Grandmother's brothers served in the war, served this country, and all of them went off to make a name for themselves or a life for themselves in Australia. My grandmother settled in eventually Ivanhoe, and that's where she's buried, in Ivanhoe. And I did get a chance to visit grandfather's grave as well. So for me, the book has a special connection, and I just want to thank the university, thank everyone involved, the Indie community, and particularly Len and Crystal, for the work that they've put in, a lifetime of work, and dare say you could keep continuing working forever and a day and never really finish the great connections that are now integrated into Australia, whether it's Woolgoolga, whether it's Griffith, whether it's Melbourne, Sydney. Indian people are continuing to contribute magnificently to this great country, and I'm just pleased that now we've got 6 generations from my great-grandfather that have lived in this country, and now we've got the 6th generation. It's a wonderful thing, great opportunities here, and it's great to see our kids now contributing, and of course here we are. Whoever would have believed that Sundar Singh's great-grandson would be a Member of Parliament? That's the great opportunities that this country gives.